When the final splinter of daylight in the lush forest completely sinks into the mottled bark fissures of an ancient sentinel tree, the entire bustling world above the surface plunges into a cold and hostile, deathly stillness under the strategic cloak of nightfall. The air is heavily permeated with the bittersweet, resinous tang unique to tree sap, alongside the slightly chilled breath exhaled by fallen leaves fermenting within the night mist. This is a harsh, unyielding domain governed strictly by the survival of the fittest, a ferocious kingdom of razor-sharp compound eyes and agile predatory claws. Yet, beneath this field filled with endless chases, deep within the frozen and hardened matrices of the ancient timber wrapped in layers of wooden fibers, a life completely sequestered from the outside world is dragging its body through the infinite, absolute darkness, emitting a low-frequency, rhythmic, raspy rumbling. This dark hermit sequestered in the marrow of the deep wood is the red-breasted carpenter bee, a solitary time soloist enduring through the most vibrant season of its existence, and the true ultimate master of dormancy in a world otherwise defined by velocity and colony socialization. Tonight, let us accompany the softly flickering hearth fire and this narrative that you need not burden your mind to remember, as we step together into the true expanse of his lifelong journey. We shall brush away the accumulated dust of eras to gaze intently upon an ancient soul that completely shatters conventional public perceptions, listening closely to that silent epic buried deep within the skeletal system of the timber. He possessed a pitch-black chassis as rigid as obsidian, coupled with wings reflecting a ghostly blue gleam, yet he was destined, throughout the most vital years of his lease on life, to completely exile himself inside a lightless timber dungeon, day after day hammering away at time with his mandibles. His name is forever accompanied by the ancient echoes of the deep forest, yet the wordless resistance he once left inside the timber during midnight hours was far more staggering than any sliding above the surface, and far gentler than any nocturne. The fractures of destiny often split open silently during the calmest of hours. For the red-breasted carpenter bee, it heralded a pitch-black showdown of spatial claustrophobia and a refusal of colony internal competition. While countless social bees, under the absolute authority of a queen, reduced into precise worker-slaves and traded all their freedom and time within a clamorous hive, the destiny of the red-breasted carpenter bee, at the precise instant he chose to turn his body alone to crush the first splinter of withered timber fiber, slid smoothly onto a completely opposite, perilous course. This represented an extraordinary, highly anomalous choice of survival. In that dark era when colony existence began to gain absolute ascendancy, the family of the red-breasted carpenter bee chose to surrender the convenience of being part of a colossal society, resolutely retreating into the shadows of dry wood and wetlands, spending long epochs completely dismantling and restructuring their anatomical layout and mental core. Their bodies became extremely robust, their thoraxes covered in a heavy carapace blanketed with a layer of cloaked reddish-brown hairs, and most staggering of all was that pair of robust mandibles forged like dark steel, uniquely tailored as geometric tools to carve hard timber out of living or dead wood. In those deep midnight forests where the overgrown canopy blotted out the sky, our protagonist red-breasted carpenter bee leisurely moved his pace across the soft, moss-covered trunk. His every landing of his foot carried a near zen-like slowness, achieving an extremely abnormal, stark contrast with those predators that would explode with ultimate velocity within seconds at any moment. He felt no pressure to frantically hunt or pursue prey under the searing daytime heat, nor did he constantly lock his nervous system into high vigilance across peril-stalked barrens. Lush mangroves enveloped his lightweight frame with tender leaves, like a compassionate mother soothing her most unconventional, rebellious child. Yet, this extreme attachment to wooden fibers and the complete abandonment of socialized shelter wrote a heavy script for his destiny from the very beginning. It meant he had mortgaged the entirety of his life's safety and reproductive lineage to this ancient dead timber world that could fracture at any moment due to storms. His lean face slightly adjusted its orientation within the gloom, his robust mandibles stripping away rough bark within the chilling night wind. In those calm and deep compound eyes sparkled a profound compassion and sobriety entirely uncharacteristic of that chaotic era, weaving his own quiet laws of survival amidst the profound silence. Famine in this bog interwoven with withered wood, fern thickets, and dim streams was his most peaceful monastery, yet also turned into an invisible shackle slowly tightening within the long river of time. Amidst the absolute imprisonment of resources and the extreme claustrophobia of space, the red-breasted carpenter bee had to not only endure an infinite vacuum but moreover wage a silent, heart-stopping, multi-season-long midnight psychological confrontation against a cloaked predator operating upon the same tree surface, the giant robber fly. The robber fly was a pure aerial assassin, armed with ultravelocity flying limbs and a venomous proboscis, capable of instantly draining the flesh and blood of any small flying insect that exposed itself within its sensory sphere. It was a soul-stirring, cloaked picture. Midnight storms raged violently outside, forcing the massive canopy of the century-old tree to let out agonizing groans, while inside that pitch-black, narrow geometric channel within the trunk, the tension of the air solidified to the absolute limit. The robber fly crept forward through the bark fissures, its thorn-flanged limbs already plunging into the entrance of the wooden channel, acting like a blind spear of death groping through the dark, radiating cold and lethal vibrational wavelengths. At this moment, our protagonist red-breasted carpenter bee was situated at a highly vulnerable turning point in the tree marrow. Due to consecutive months of relentless boring, his robust mandibles throbbed from the mechanical wear of the hard wood, rendering his mobility sluggish. Fear grew wildly inside his heart, for he knew better than anyone that if that toxic needle pierced his body, his vital flesh would instantly transform into the debris of this jungle. Yet, staring directly into a dead end with no avenue of escape, he did not choose to frantically fly out of the entrance, because blind flight would generate intense microturbulences in the air currents, which amounted to handing his precise spatial coordinates directly to the robber fly outside. Instead, he made a staggering, beautifully wise movement. Advancing toward the path of the encroaching danger, he slowly and resolutely turned his body around, utilizing his exceptionally broad, shield-like, pitch-black cuticular carapace of the abdomen to exceptionally slowly plug the narrow tunnel behind him, constructing an impenetrable barrier wall within a few short minutes. When the venomous needle of the robber fly finally fractured the entrance dead end, what it struck was no longer a succulent arthropod body, but an unyielding, lifeless carapace mask packed dense by the bee. This strategic duel, unfolding in the deep core of the wood, spilled not a single drop of blood, yet flawlessly illustrated an ultimate hermit's patience and staggering management of peril. The red-breasted carpenter bee, with his restrained, hidden, yet utterly fragile lie of silence, forcefully maintained a safe haven of bliss within the ruthless forest depths. However, fate's most stinging moments never came from strong external enemies, but from a slow-acting output situated upon life's mandatory path, alongside the painful compensation a body must endure for a cloaked paternal gentleness. When the engineering of months finally reached structural completion within the core of the dry wood, our protagonist red-breasted carpenter bee did not claim this perfect geometric architecture exclusively for himself, but initiated the heaviest yet softest labor of his existence. He had to systematically blend pollen and resin collected through grueling migrations during every pitch-black deep night, rolling them into heavy pollen balls that radiated a subtle sheen, and then exceptionally precisely deposit them within the depths of every compartmentalized circular nursery cell. This represented a dark cultivation of self-deprivation and devotion. Within every partition, he had to not only deposit a single egg but moreover utilize his own saliva blended with wood dust to construct geometric partition walls thin as a cicada's wing yet waterproof and insulated, completely sealing his offspring inside deep, centimeters-long wooden sarcophagi woven from living fibers. One can visualize, late on an intensely frigid deep autumn night, our protagonist red-breasted carpenter bee resting alone at the terminus of a cold wooden corridor. His lean face appeared remarkably ancient beneath the moonbeams, and those once radiant reddish-brown hairs upon his thorax appeared thin and shattered due to long mechanical friction and labor. The aroma of surrounding resin turned thick and pungent, choked by a lack of atmospheric circulation. An absolute sense of compression spread frantically through every single one of his tracheae. He struggled to maintain a faint respiration within the residual fragments of his consciousness, enduring a chronic fatigue and an anomalous, searing heat left behind by long years of boring hard timber. A deeper sorrow weighed upon his inner heart. At this supreme moment of reproductive lineage, not a single ray of sunlight could enter to deliver a blessing, nor could any kin of a colony reach inside to afford a flash of vital warmth. He was an island of absolute solitude forgotten by time in the deep wood. This was a soul-saving nirvana spanning multiple weeks, devoid of blood-drenched combat, characterized only by a life enduring the intense agony of structural reorganization in absolute claustrophobia and silence. When the weeks of reproductive labor finally reached their ultimate boundary, and his battered carapace completely executed its final wear within the absolute claustrophobia, our protagonist red-breasted carpenter bee made a heavy decision steeped in amphibious, solitary courage and a tragic sense of destiny. He chose to leverage that pair of monumental mandibles, resembling twin saws of tempered steel, to saw through the final, thickest barrier of dead timber standing between his chassis and the open sky, leaving a final open corridor of freedom for his developing offspring. It was a wordless declaration of war waged for the freedom of respiration. No companions accompanied his march, he stood entirely alone. He had to hammer his head against the cold timber, his 6 long legs leaving silent, profound, yet eternal climbing marks along the narrow, dark tunnel. After 3 consecutive days and nights of unyielding drilling, pushed to the brink of collapse by extreme metabolic overdraft and severe hypoxia, the physical reserves of our protagonist hit their absolute limit. His massive, heavy frame fell powerlessly flaccid amidst a rustling friction along the center of a half-meter-long, vertical exit channel. He slowly opened his newly born, colossal compound eyes, radiating a deep, glossy black sheen, amidst the cold mounds of sawdust, yet because not a sliver of sky light penetrated this sector, what met his gaze was still an absolute void of night. Despair grew wildly inside his heart, for he knew better than anyone that if he abandoned the drilling at this exact juncture, this channel he had personally hammered for years would transform into his final, magnificent tomb. Yet, staring directly into the jaws of death, he let out no meaningless, frantic cries. He merely clamped his limbs tighter in the silence, commandingly pumping the absolute remainder of his precious energy through his nervous system into his trembling mandibles. The night winds howled loudly outside the bark of distant trees, sounding like an eternal call echoing from a faraway sky, mocking this microscopic insect struggling inside the wood. Within this deep timbered dungeon devoid of a single whispering draft, this pitch-black hermit leveraged his final, warm obsession to erect a wordless fortress of dignity and destiny reversal in the deep night, until those sharp mandibles crushed one last fiber blocking the light, allowing a biting, fresh midnight breeze carrying the scent of damp earth to brush across his wet face for the very first time after tens of thousands of hammer blows on the first midnight following his emergence. Operating on the final countdown of an exodus that had crossed years of dark dormancy, the red-breasted carpenter decently crawled out from the century-old tree that had imprisoned his entire existence, arriving at the supreme stage of his destiny, the absolute apex of a primeval redwood canopy splashed with pristine moonlight and spangled with brilliant stars. The air here was remarkably vast and free, devoid of the suffocating compression of the deep wood, populated only by countless tender leaves swaying to a soothing rhythm in the night wind, alongside an ancient nocturne whispered by a distant stream. Yet, by this time, our protagonist had completely burned away all vital nutrients from his early existence in this earth-shaking, cocoon-shattering reversal. His movements appeared slightly sluggish yet remarkably elegant. His 2 pairs of newly born, colossal wings reflecting a ghostly blue sheen groomed with supreme gentleness within the chilling night breeze, as if executing a first, hand-holding recognition with this star-filled sky he had never before seen. He slowly and decently moved his massive, pitch-black frame toward a blooming nocturnal flower, as the moist night dew brushed once more across his exquisite chassis dotted with reddish-brown hairs, enveloping a body that had spent years under extreme pressure. It breathed out a gentle sigh echoing from his ancient ancestors in the wind. His pair of monumental compound eyes gleamed with deep light beneath the moonbeams, looking out one final time toward the deepest, darkest, unknown night sky of the forest, that was the pursuit of his life, and his rightful, soaring flight of destiny. He slowly unfurled those paper-thin flying inner wings hidden beneath the hardened shields. With the surging of the final warm current within his body, he leapt lightly into that boundless moonlight he had traded a lifetime of solitude to achieve. He disturbed not a single grain of dust, only the low-frequency rumble of his wings slicing through the air echoed out, sounding like a final song of perfect fulfillment sung for this magnificent titan of time. He soared into the upper atmosphere at the zenith of starlight, decently and elegantly withdrawing from that ancient kingdom of deep wood where he had once languished and suffered, when the grand magic of tectonic and environmental turnover plays out relentlessly across tens of millions of years of time. That century-old tree which had recorded every secret and solitary solo of the red-breasted carpenter eventually collapsed under the merciless weathering of epochs, thoroughly buried and enveloped by sand, soil, and mire to transform into the cold, hard, and pitch-black shale and coal seams deep within the earth's strata today. Yet, those geometric nursery channels, once packed with survival bluffs and fragile cells, were meticulously preserved in their structural perfection through the compounding layer-by-layer sculptings of silt and minerals across eras, transforming into an immortal fossil specimen within modern museum archives, becoming an incredible puzzle of biological evolution in the eyes of modern humanity. Whenever the modern midnight arrives and the crisp wilderness winds sweep across the vast, open barrens, those colossal timber-poor tracks sequestered deep within rock walls seem to still radiate a faint ancient sigh in the darkness. The red-breasted carpenter bee, this sole deep timber-time soloist of the insect era, never surrendered the restraint and decency of a grand strategist amidst brutal, physical carnage, nor did he exhibit meaningless panic before long years of cold claustrophobia. He simply chose, in his quiet daily routine, to leverage ultimate patience to return the vital gravity of time. The legacy he surrendered to the earth is far grander than mere spectacular carapaced specimens. It is a profound midnight echo of how life, when confronting an absolute, dark genetic destiny and protracted solitude, can employ wisdom and absolute bluffs to safeguard the monumental dignity of existence. Masks will inevitably wither, and grand eras will shift, but that solitary pride which once stood beneath the shadows to confront the entire predator world in complete silence has long since fused into the foundational marrow of this earth. Now, the night has grown exceedingly deep, and the winds on the wastes have hushed into total silence. That lonely giant, who played his part so masterfully and looked past life and death, has already found his absolute rest in the distant cradle of time. And you, who have faithfully accompanied this protracted journey of deep diving and destiny reversal, may now shed every ounce of your daytime exhaustion, armor, and defenses, close your eyes, and allow yourself to dissolve into the gentlest, deepest of sweet dreams beneath this ancient, soothing night.